The skies over the arid Arizona desert turned a somber gray as the sun began its slow retreat behind a waning moon, heralding an eclipse that would mark an omen in the hearts of many. Beneath this uncanny twilight, in a hidden canyon bordered by ragged cliffs and wind-carved rock, a young woman fought to bring life forth into the world. Her name was Elena, and she bore the weight of both her solitude and a secret that set her apart from the indifferent world of settlers and cowboys. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've got something extra special saved just for you. Elena's hands gripped the edge of her rough-hewn cot as the first convulsions of labor racked her frail frame. The desert air, heavy with the scent of sagebrush and dust, carried whispers of old legends, a prophecy of a child whose birth under the eclipse would herald change across the ruthless lands of the West. Villagers spoke of the flames of destiny and the spirit of fire that would bind the future of warring factions, yet none dared approach the mystery. For Elena, ostracized by the very people who claimed to live by steadfast customs, the prophecy was less a source of hope than a cross to bear. In the shadows of that uncanny day, a solitary figure rode slowly along a narrow trail, trailing dust as his lone horse plodded forward. Jonah was a rugged drifter, whose weathered face and weary eyes told a tale of tragedies past, of lost kin and burned bridges. His quiet journey took him far from the clamor of saloons and the guilt-ridden memories of his old life. Guided by an inexplicable pull, he found himself near the canyon where Elena's anguished cries mingled with the eerie silence of the eclipse. As Jonah dismounted and approached the quiet refuge, the sound of clashing metal, hidden only by the dramatic interplay of light and shadow, seemed to herald his arrival. His spurs jingled softly in the dusty air, punctuating the cadence of his steps as he neared the stoop of a weathered shack built into the side of the canyon wall. Its door was ajar, revealing only the flickering glow of a hastily lit lantern that danced with the unnamed shapes within. Inside, Elena writhed against pain and fear, her body straining in concert with the distant rumble of the heavens. The eclipse was nearly total now, casting an otherworldly pallor over her determined face. In that moment, as time seemed to decelerate, every breath she took was pregnant with fate. The room's sparse furnishings, a creaking cot, a rough-spun blanket, some shattered glass that had once held water, served as the silent witnesses to what was to come. Outside, winds whispered among the gnarled Joshua trees, as if incanting the destiny of the child about to be born. Jonah, whose hardened exterior belied a soul still capable of tenderness, paused at the doorway. The gentle glow of the lantern illuminated Elena's features, a mix of exhaustion and fierce resolve, and stirred something long dormant within him. In the brief exchange of glances between guardian and stranger, an unspoken promise passed between them, that fate had brought him to her side at this critical moment. Without a word, he crossed the threshold, offering a steadying hand as the labor's intensity surged forth. "Elena," he murmured, his voice a rough whisper, "you're not alone." His words, sparse but genuine, fanned the embers of hope struggling to survive in a heart of despair. With deliberate care, he assisted her, his hands as gentle as the ephemeral light that slipped through the cracks of the ancient walls. He gathered what few supplies remained, a woven blanket, a tin cup filled with water, and prepared to help her navigate the tumult of birth amid nature's most mystical portent. Outside, as the eclipse reached its peak, the world seemed to hold its breath. The light that once bathed the landscape in stark contrast was now transformed into a surreal twilight where every shadow whispered forgotten secrets. The rhythm of nature's heartbeat, echoing the distant moan of the wind, melded with the cadence of Elena's labored breaths. In this twilight interstice, time and destiny intertwined. For hours it felt like both minutes and eternities. Jonah served as a steadfast sentinel and compassionate aid, glancing occasionally toward the open door, as if he expected not just the arrival of a child, but the dawning of a long-awaited change. He recalled the scattered lore of old, that only a child touched by the light of both darkness and flame could bridge the ever-widening gap between the factions that waged silent wars on these dusty lands. Yet, as the eclipse cast its ephemeral shadows across the canyon, Even Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off-kilter in the air, a presage to events that might sweep all away. At last, with a final heave of incomparable strength, Elena cried out once more as life entered the room, a piercing sound that mingled with the fading whispers of the eclipse. In that hushed and charged moment, a child emerged into the world. The newborn, fragile yet seemingly imbued with an otherworldly aura, bore a singular mark upon the small hand that first grasped for life, a flame-shaped scar etched in brilliant reddish tones, as if fire had kissed the very skin at the moment of birth. Jonah stared at the mark, his heart pounding in his own chest. The symbol seemed too deliberate, too potent to be mere chance. Elena, both elated and fearful, clasped the tiny creature close as she looked into Jonah's eyes, a silent exchange of wonder, trepidation, and unspoken understanding. The child's mark seemed to pulse faintly, resonating with quiet, internal flame that neither the eclipse nor the barren desert could diminish. As the first waning glimmers of the obscured sun began to reassert themselves on the horizon, an uncanny stillness gripped the air. The baby, swaddled in a blanket that was as much a part of fate as was the eclipse, stared up into a sky now tinged with both violet and gold. The desert, usually a realm of endless monotony and unyielding hardship, now harbored a secret ferocity, a promise that change was in the windy depths of the coming days. Jonah wondered silently if this child was destined to be more than what the harsh world had allowed in its kiss of fate. Yet, even as he searched his heart for a hope that might bind the divided souls of his once broken world, a distant sound in the fading light pricked at their fragile sanctuary, a soft, measured footfall along the creek bed outside, echoing the rhythm of an arrival neither welcomed nor expected. Before they could exchange further words or absorb the portent of that sound, a muted rustle of leaves and the unmistakable clink of metal against stone crept through the evening air. Jonah's eyes locked with the horizon, where a dust cloud stirred, a sign perhaps of those who roamed these lands with score to settle, or of scouts sent by voices beyond the known horizons. Elena's grip tightened on her newborn, and even the ceaseless wind seemed to whisper further trials ahead. In that charged moment, as the eclipse's phantom glow slowly gave way to an uncertain dawn, the promise of destiny and danger mingled, a delicate equilibrium poised on the knife edge of legend and reality. Jonah, Elena, and the marked child found themselves defenseless against an approaching enigma. What stretched before them was not merely the barren, unyielding desert, but a future illuminated by a blazing, mysterious destiny that had only just begun to reveal its hidden contours. And as the approaching silhouettes drew nearer, the desert waited with bated breath for the next spark in a tale yet untold. The echo of mysterious footfalls from part one soon yielded to the cautious approach of two figures emerging from the undulating haze of the desert. In the dusky aftermath of the eclipse, as twilight surrendered to a hesitant night, Jonah and Elena found solace in the fragile shelter of the canyon shack. Yet, the reprieve was as ephemeral as the last vestiges of the eclipsed sun. Two riders, cloaked in worn leather and carrying the air of one who has seen much hardship on these unforgiving trails, paused at the shack's threshold. Their dusty faces and measured steps bespoke a guarded determination. Jonah, ever alert, stepped forward with the quiet resolve of a man wary of intruders, his eyes narrowing as he assessed these newcomers. Elena, her tender gaze fixed on the child swaddled in her arms, braced herself against the memories of a harsh past, a past in which she had been shunned and misunderstood. The desert around them, with its brush of sage and wind-whipped dust, held its breath as the two figures closed the gap. The taller of the pair, a Native American scout with deep-set eyes that mirrored enduring sorrow and ancient wisdom, spoke in a measured tone. "I am Dakota, a servant of the old ways. I sense a disturbance in the spirit of the land, an omen intertwined with prophecy of heat and rebirth. We must speak." His companion, a younger warrior with an expressive, haunted gaze, remained silent but vigilant, his hand hovering near the worn rifle slung across his shoulder. Jonah's hardened features betrayed a flicker of recognition, a remembrance of painful losses that had left him hesitant to trust even those with noble intent. "We mean no harm," Jonah replied, voice roughened by dust and memories. This isn't a battleground for shadowy strangers. We have seen enough sorrow on these lands. His tone, though measured, hinted at the scars of a life marred by violence and grief. Inside the humble confines of the shack, Elena's fingers tightened around the child as fragments of a long-forgotten lore stirred within her. She recalled whispered legends of her youth, a tale of a celestial event and a child marked by flames, heralding transformative power over the western frontier. The prophecy, passed down in hushed murmurs among those marginalized by society, had always been a forbidden truth. Now, facing the raw aftermath of her own birth, Elena felt its weight in every trembling heartbeat. "We are bound together by more than circumstance," she said softly, her voice carrying both strength and vulnerability. "There is a fire written in my blood, a promise of change that once roared through these lands. I remember my mother's tale on nights wrapped in desert silence, when the elders spoke of a child who would mend old wounds with the spark of hope." Takoda's eyes darkened with understanding. The old seers foretold that under the eclipse, when the sun was shrouded in the sky, the spirit of fire would ignite within the child. They spoke of healing borders and uniting hearts divided by enmity. But the path would be fraught with peril, as harsh and relentless as the desert wind. His words resonated with both reverence and forewarning, setting the air thick with inevitable destiny. Jonah glanced furtively at the child, whose small hand, marked with flame that seemed to pulse with an inner light, appeared to radiate a warmth that belied the November chill in the canyon. The newborn's eyes, as yet unfocused and wise beyond years, flickered in the dim lantern light, as if aware of the heavy burden of fate already placed upon its frail form. Jonah's thoughts wandered momentarily to the echoes of his own shattered past, the memories of a family extinguished by the ruthless blaze of revenge and circumstance. His reluctance to form new bonds clashed with sudden, inexplicable compulsion to shield his child and the vulnerable mother who had dared defy a world of prejudice and despair. For a long, suspended moment, silence reigned inside the shack, punctuated only by the soft cooing of the infant and the distant murmur of the desert night. Jonah, though burdened by grief and hardened by the unforgiving landscape, sensed an impetus rising within him, a desire to redeem his lost honor by protecting something pure and transformative. "We have nurtured a spark during the darkest hour," he murmured, his eyes never leaving the solemn face of Takoda. "A spark that, if tended well, could kindle hope in even the coldest hearts." Elena's voice, though quiet, carried the weight of mystery and destiny. "My mother was a woman outcast not only for what she believed, but for the truth in her blood. They said the desert whispered her spirit's secrets in the winds, and that our lineage was entwined with that pale, sacred fire, a promise and a curse passed down through generations." Her words, steeped in both sorrow and defiance, resonated among the scattered relics of the shack, as if calling forth the memories of the ancient earth and sky. Takoda's companion, the stoic young warrior, shifted his weight and spoke with measured caution. And yet, words alone cannot dispel the coming storm. Rumor has it that murmurs of this prophecy have fanned the flames of unrest among the settlers and stirred ancient grudges among my people. There are those who seek to extinguish what they fear may upend long-held orders. His eyes darted briefly toward the canyon entrance, as if expecting the wind to carry more ominous tidings. The eerie, half-heard crackle of an unseen force seemed to ripple over the arid expanse, heightening the sense of foreboding that swirled like the dust outside. Jonah, compelled by a mix of duty and reluctant hope, stepped toward a makeshift table strewn with fading maps and weathered notes he'd secretly gathered over his long travels. With measured care, he spread out a crumpled document and traced a rough route across what appeared to be the contested lands of the frontier. "There's talk among the scattered townsfolk and wanderers alike of strange happenings in the borderlands," he confided, his tone a blend of caution and resolve. "I once knew a family lost to a wildfire, a tragedy born of factional strife. I swore then that I'd shield the innocent from repeating that destiny. Perhaps this child is meant to bridge a chasm that has long divided these people." Elena's eyes glistened with a mix of despair and fierce determination as she folded her arms around her child. "I have heard the old songs, the ones my mother sang in secret when the moon was full and the stars danced above the mesa. They spoke of a time when the land would be healed by a luminous flame, guiding us through the bitter nights to a dawn of unity. Her voice, both cryptic and resonant, flickered like a candle flame defying the cold gusts of fate. Dakota, inclined to trust the ancient omens above the skepticism of modern prejudice, continued, "The next phase of our journey may lead us to the sacred grounds of my ancestors, the heart of the canyon where the earth and sky meet in a dance of shadow and light. It is there that the true meaning of this prophecy may be revealed, but I warn you, the path is steeped in forgotten rituals and guarded by those who prize tradition above all else." As the weight of his words settled over the group, the child stirred, as if in tune with the pulsating energy of the land. The flame mark along the infant's hand shimmered briefly, casting a warm radiance that contrasted sharply with the chill of the encroaching night. A sudden gust of wind snaked through the splintered boards of the shack, sending swirling patterns of dust and a faint echo of a forgotten lullaby through the room. The air seemed charged with an energy both ominous and hopeful, a delicate balance between renewal and destruction. Jonah's resolve hardened against the backdrop of the starlit sky. With a gloved hand resting protectively over the child, he said, "It is time we followed the call of destiny beyond these walls." His words, precise and laden with purpose, resonated with the unspoken truth that each man and woman carried within the souls of those who had suffered beneath the burden of the past. Elena, her voice tinged with both fear and an unwavering belief in the prophecy, responded, "I know not what future awaits us, but I believe that the fire in our blood can heal the wounds that have long festered in these lands." For a moment, the trio, Jonah, Elena, and their unexpected allies, stood united, encircled by the silent majesty of the desert, as if nature itself awaited their decision. Just then, the soft murmur of footsteps echoed beyond the shattered door. The group tensed as shadows coalesced at the cusp of the nearby ridge, a swirling ensemble of shapes and dust that signaled more visitors. A voice, barely a whisper yet carrying the weight of imminent consequence, called out from the gloom, "The land speaks tonight, and it warns an approaching reckoning." Eyes widened in unison. Jonah's heart pounded with the dread of impending fate, as the enigmatic utterance reverberated against ancient stone and stilled their breaths. In that pregnant pause, as the desert cloaked their words with uncertainty and the night deepened its hold, it became clear that not all who approached bore intentions of peace. A premonition lingered in the charged air, a hint that the secrets of the prophecy were far more formidable than any souls present could have fathomed. With the desert wind echoing the unknown warning and mysterious voices growing steadily clearer, yet still unresolved, Jonah tightened his grip on the child. He exchanged a grave glance with Dakota, knowing that this next encounter might well reshape the bonds of loyalty and enmity that defined this unforgiving land. As the approaching figures emerged from the murk of twilight, details began to coalesce, a blend of weathered faces, furrowed expressions, and eyes that glinted with an urgency born of communal pain. With every muted step, the desert seemed to whisper, beckoning them into a future rife with promise and peril alike. And as the night stretched on, uncertain and full of portent, the flames of destiny flickered brighter, a silent, growing revelation that would soon demand its due tribute from all who dare to stand in its light. What awaited them amidst these shifting shadows that might either unite fractured souls or plunge them deeper into chaos? The murmurs from beyond the canyon shack grew into clear voices cutting through the desert twilight. As the last vestiges of the eclipse faded into a starlit abyss, the figures that had once been mere silhouettes now materialized into a small contingent led by a weathered settler with cautious eyes and an austere preacher whose voice carried both authority and veiled menace. Their horses, lathered with sweat and dust, snorted uneasily as they approached the narrow haven where destiny and uncertainty intertwined. Jonah stepped forward, his rugged frame silhouetted against the flickering lantern light, as he met the settler leader's stern gaze. "Who comes here?" he demanded, his tone both protective and measured. The leader, a man named Silas with lines of hardship etched on his face, replied, voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination, "We come on word of strange happenings. of a child marked by flame and omens that foretell disruption to our way of life. His eyes darted between the faces gathered in the dim light. Elena clutched her newborn close, while Dakota, ever calm and sure, stood with quiet authority, his silent companion still at his side. The preacher, his voice raspy as if born of years spent intoning dire sermons under scorching suns, continued, "The land has whispered warnings, and we are here to see if the prophesied reckoning is naught but superstition or a sign of divine retribution." His words hung heavy in the cool night, laden with prejudice and the fear of changes beyond his control. Elena, her gaze steady yet sorrowful, met Silas's apprehension. "I bear the legacy of voices that spoke of this flame," she replied softly, each word deliberate. "A promise of healing, a curse born in the heart of the desert. My mother's lullabies warn that even the fiercest blaze serves to purify and transform." Her voice, trembling with both grief and resolve, evoked a mystical memory of ancient rituals recited around firelight and beneath endless skies. Dakota interjected in a measured tone. "The land and our ancestors have long foreseen a child whose mark ignites the path to unity among warring hearts. But the same truth unsettles those who cling to the old orders." His dark eyes swept across the group, settling momentarily on the preacher, whose forced assurance did little to ease the undercurrent of fear. Jonah's mind churned with conflicted recollections of his own shattered past, a family consumed by literal and metaphorical fire, memories scorched into his very soul. His protective instincts surged, compelling him to shield both Elena and the child from the cruelty of disbelief and hostility. Yet that same heart quivered with the dread of losing yet another semblance of belonging. "We have no quarrel with those seeking truth," he stated quietly, glancing toward his fragile charge. "But these lands have seen enough sorrow. If you wish to share in our burdens, you must tread with care." At that moment, as conversation filled the narrow space between uncertainty and promise, the child stirred. The flame-shaped birthmark along its delicate hand pulsed, a subtle, yet undeniable, glow that seemed to illuminate the fractured space between light and darkness. Elena's eyes widened, reflecting both wonder and alarm as the infant's tiny fingers flexed, and for one breathless moment, the room was bathed in a warm radiance that defied the chill of night. In that luminous burst, the distant howl of the wind seemed to harmonize, reciting the ancient verse of a forgotten ritual. Silence reigned as all present absorbed the inexplicable phenomenon. The preacher's brow furrowed and his voice faltered. What sorcery is this?" he stuttered, though his tone was more of a question shadowed by fear than of awe. Dakota's companion, his hand resting near the grip of his rifle, shifted as if to signal a silent rally of readiness. Gazing at the newborn, Jonah's voice softened as he murmured, "This child, it is as if nature itself bends to its will." His words were a blend of hope and a tacit warning of forces greater than mortal grievances, a voice that resonated with the secret longing for redemption within him. Elena took a slow breath, her eyes fixed on a mark that now grew faintly luminous in the soft glow of the oil lantern. "I remember a tale," she whispered, her voice scarcely audible over the distant hum of the desert night. "In a time beyond reckoning, the elders spoke of a sacred spring hidden amid these very canyons, a wellspring of life and renewal. They said that the child, marked by the celestial fire, would awaken a dormant spirit in the earth, uniting the fractured souls of the sun-scorched land." Her words wove together myth and memory like threads in a fragile tapestry, promising redemption and change even as fear lurked at its edges. Silas, clearly unsettled by the revelation, pressed on. "But such omens bring danger as much as hope. We have heard that rival factions, both settlers and those of the ancient tribes, fear the balance that such power could tip. Our forefathers fought fiercely to maintain control over this land, and legends now ignite old wounds." His eyes darted at Dakota, whose serene countenance belied the turbulent undercurrents of ancestral struggle. Dakota's voice, laced with timeless wisdom, affirmed, "Indeed, the sacred spring we speak of lies deep in canyons that even our people rarely traverse. It is said that there, the trials of spirit and flesh combine to reveal the true nature of one's heart. If the prophecy is to be fulfilled, We must travel there, unwavering through perils both natural and man-made. But understand this, its power can unite even the most bitter of foes, or it can rend them asunder. His words, as measured as they were foreboding, hinted at a journey that transcended simple mortals' ambitions. Jonah's hands, rugged and callous from a lifetime of hardship, gripped the corroded latch of an old chest filled with aged maps and carved tokens, reminders of places where fate and violence met. He unfurled a weathered parchment, revealing a line that traced a meandering path to the sacred spring said to lie beyond the ridge. I once wandered these lands lost and alone, scarred by fires of vengeance, he confessed, voice heavy with regret. I never believed a spark could heal the deepest wounds. Yet here we stand, with fate offering a chance at mending what once was broken. His eyes met Elena's, seeking an unspoken promise of trust and purpose that only a kindred spirit could provide. As tension simmered and the weight of old rivalries pressed against their fragile unity, the desert itself seemed to pulse with an almost imperceptible tremor. The ground beneath the shack rumbled softly, as if echoing the ancient rhythm of the earth. Even the wind appeared to whisper secrets of the sacred spring and the destiny of the child marked by fire. A low, resonant quiver stirred the air, prompting both caution and a yearning curiosity among those gathered. Before any further words could be exchanged, a shrill cry shattered the momentary calm, a sound not of man or beast, but of nature's raw, untamed fury. The ground shuddered, and shards of dry earth tumbled from the canyon walls, as if pulled by an unseen force. For a heartbeat, every eye focused on the trembling earth, each mind racing with the implications of this startling disruption. The preacher's voice cracked through the ensuing silence. It is a sign, a portent that what is to come cannot be forestalled. Takota's expression remained as somber as the desert night, yet his eyes betrayed a spark of urgency. This earth speaks to us, he intoned, his tone reverberating with ancient gravitas. It speaks of a time when the trials of faith and destiny converge. The sacred spring calls us, and its voice grows louder with each tremor beneath our feet. We must decide our course quickly before external forces exploit this unrest to stoke further discord. His words, measured yet powerful, lent weight to the prospect of a journey that held both hope and peril. Jonah, torn between the pull of newly kindled bonds and the eternal scarring of past losses, felt the burden of his oath pressing upon his soul. His eyes lingered on the small child whose quiet supernatural act had cast doubt on all he knew about chance and fate. "We have little time," he murmured, his voice resolute despite the turmoil churning within him. "The land rallies with our every step and counsels us to leave these confines. That sacred spring, if true, could be the turning point for us all." His words were both an invitation and a gentle command, calling forth a purpose deeper than any he had dared embrace before. As the group weighed their options in the trembling twilight, Silas shifted uneasily, his gaze falling on the dark horizon where the first hints of dawn began to mingle with the lingering stars. "We must choose, to stand amid the turmoil of inherited fear, or to journey into the unknown with hearts unburdened by old grudges," he said, his voice a blend of hope and trepidation. Even the preacher's previously confident tone wavered, besieged by the overwhelming aura of destiny. In that charged moment, as the canyon walls quaked under the weight of destiny and the desert murmured warnings of both promise and peril, the group reached a silent accord. They would venture forth to seek the sacred spring, despite the risks, despite the old wounds yet unhealed. Yet in the perplexing murk of night, as if the earth itself intended to test their resolve, an abrupt, resonant pulse vibrated through the stone. The flame mark in the child's hand flared fiercely, defying the subterranean tremors, and for one suspended heartbeat, the air shimmered as if ignited by an unearthly blaze. A final, mournful gust of wind swept to the shattered doorway of the shack, carrying with it a whispered promise and a lingering question. Will the pilgrimage to the sacred spring unite fractured hearts and heal the bitter scars of the past, or would it ignite a new reckoning born of unbridled fate? As the pulse faded into an eerie stillness, all eyes converged on the ignited mark in the path illuminated by the spectral glow of that destiny-infused flame. In that moment of impending decision, beneath a sky fraught with dwindling stars and the silent watch of ancient mountains, each heartbeat a forewarning of trials that would soon test the limits of both courage and hope. And as the first tremors of the next unknown challenge began to ripple over the rugged earth, the desert, cloaked in ancient mystery, beckoned them all toward an uncertain dawn. Under a sky still heavy with secrets of the nocturnal hours, the group stirred at first light. Their temporary refuge, a weathered canyon shack that had borne silent witness to destiny's birth, now lay behind them like a fading half-remembered dream. With cautious resolve, Jonah, Elena, Takota, the silent warrior, and a reluctant Silas prepared a journey toward the sacred spring spoken of in half-whispered legends. The preacher's intentions remained ambiguous, his dark eyes hinting at schemes beyond mere concern for prophesied child, while the chill of new threats and old wounds intermingled in every measured glance. The first steps out into the awakening wilderness were quiet, each footfall absorbed by the dew-laden earth. The canyon walls, steep and scarred by ages of wind and time, framed their path as they trekked along a narrow pass. Here, the world narrowed to a corridor of stone and light, a natural gauntlet that tested their resolve before the vast, merciless desert could embrace them again. The air held a metallic tang as remnants of the night mixed with the cool breath of morning, and in that light, the group's faces revealed traces of determination and lingering sorrow. Jonah rode at the head of the column, his gaze scanning the horizon for hazards both natural and man-made. Every tremor of the earth reminded him of the past he had long tried to escape, the fire that had burned his kin. Though his heart still bore that heavy scar, he now found himself drawn to protect Elena and the child, whose flame mark pulsed like a beacon in the dim light each time danger lurked. His worn hand would often tighten in quiet resolve as he recalled how that mark had flared during the tremors at the shack, as if heralding an unseen force that watched over them. Elena, riding a tired mare in the rear, cradled her infant close against her chest. In the quiet clatter of hooves over rocky terrain and the soft murmurs of her guardians, she embraced her destiny. The prophetic tales her mother had once whispered by a flickering campfire now played out in her mind, a time when the sacred spring, hidden away in a forgotten ravine, would heal the anger and sorrow of the land. With every step, she seemed to embody both vulnerability and strength, her eyes fixed on the shimmering promise that lay ahead. Along the route, Takota led the way with an almost otherworldly calm. Stopping occasionally beneath gnarled mesquite trees, he knelt in silent prayer before the earth. In these moments, he would trace figures in the dust with careful strokes, a ritual passed down by his ancestors. The warrior, ever watchful at his side, rarely interrupted, but occasionally exchanged a word in a low, measured tone. Their ritual was meant to honor the land's ancient spirit and to open their hearts to its secrets. Today, Takota's ritual yielded a small token, a river stone etched with curving symbols, glowing faintly in the newborn light. Takota interpreted this as a sign that the sacred spring was near, its location etched in the very fabric of the desert. Silas rode alongside Jonah with an intensity that belied his internal conflict. A settler hardened by harsh realities and haunted by the memory of a lost kin, he found himself torn between deep-seated superstition and a begrudging recognition of the child's rare aura. While his eyes revealed skepticism about the prophecy, each time the child's mark shimmered in concert with the rhythm of the wind, doubt gnawed at him. "It stirs something ancient," he muttered one morning, more to himself than to any other, "a stirring of hearts that cannot be ignored." Yet in his tone lay an uncertainty that would challenge the unity of the group as they ventured deeper into the enigmatic terrain. Their path wound along a ridge where the rugged mesas dipped down to reveal a vast, storm-swept plain. It was here that nature's caprice unfurled with sudden ferocity. Dark, heavy clouds gathered in a manner that belied the clear skies of the early morning. A prelude to the desert's transient wrath was in the air, a dust-laden, howling wind that whispered of change and conflict. Out on the plain, the group paused as the sky mottled from brilliant cobalt to a tumultuous charcoal. The approaching storm seemed to carry with it the echoes of ancient battle cries and nature's own lament. In that charged silence, The child, swaddled and silent beside Elena, began to exhibit signs of its unusual power. The flame-shaped mark danced at the infant's small hand, its glow intensifying in response to the building tempest. With the fervor of a spark kindled in dry tinder, the brightness pulsed rhythmically, as though communicating in a language written in heat and light. Elena's eyes widened in both awe and apprehension. "It is as though the child is calling to the storm," she whispered, a tremor of both wonder and dread in her voice. Her conviction in the prophecy wavered now. The phenomenon was unprecedented even to the old legends. Jonah's rugged face reflected the conflict of instinct and memory. Memories of wildfires, of infernos that had devoured his past, flashed through his mind. Yet here, confronted with the miraculous interplay of nature and destiny, his protective purpose surged anew. "Steady now," he urged, raising his hand as if to quell both the growing storm and the precarious tide of doubt within his heart. His voice, rough but resolute, sought to bind the group together with a common purpose: to reach the sacred spring and unlock the healing power that the prophecy ordained. Under Takota's guidance, the party veered off the treacherous plain, following a hidden trail discovered by the rhythmic signs in the land. The etched stone, the pulsing mark, and even the wind's cryptic song. At times, the children of the desert, sparrows and lizards, appeared to draw near, as if offering silent benedictions. The group's journey began to meld the tangible hardships of the terrain with the intangible threads of fate, forging a bond not easily undone by doubt or fear. As twilight began to creep back over the horizon, the weathered rock formation seemed to pulse with a secret energy. The sacred spring was rumored to lie beyond a narrow, winding canyon whose walls were adorned with ancient petroglyphs. The symbols, carved long ago by a people whose voices had long since faded into lore, depicted scenes of water, fire, and rebirth. With every step closer, an almost imperceptible vibration thrummed through the ground. Silas's eyes darted nervously as he contemplated the possibility that his world, so often governed by the rational and the known, might be forced to reckon with the inexplicable. In the dimming light, Takota paused at the canyon's mouth, his gaze fixed on the swirling shadows that danced upon the stone. He began to murmur softly, invoking the name of spirits and ancestors with a reverence that made the very air seem to shiver. The warrior stood silently beside him, eyes alert and brow furrowed with the weight of unspoken caution. "The sacred spring lies within," Takota intoned solemnly. "But the path ahead is guarded by challenges that will test not only our bodies, but the very spirit of our resolve." Elena's heart pounded as she adjusted the little bundle of life tucked against her side. In that moment, the child's mark flared once more, a burst of incandescent flame that rivaled the first stars piercing the twilight. The sudden brilliance momentarily overpowered the encroaching darkness, revealing not only the rugged details of the canyon, but also the subtle contours of a mysterious figure leaning against a rock, a newcomer whose eyes glowed with an unspoken purpose. Before anyone could speak, a harsh wind howled through the jagged canyon, scattering loose stones and stirring a fine layer of dust that obscured the newcomer momentarily. The figure's presence felt neither wholly hostile nor benign, only charged with an urgency that chilled the blood. In that instant of disarray, hearts pounded with renewed trepidation. Familiar bonds were tested by the revelation that not all secrets of the sacred spring were meant to be unearthed easily. Jonah's instinct to protect surged as he reached for his revolver, while Takota's steady hand moved to intercept any potential threat with the calm of a seasoned warrior. Elena, caught between the fear for her child and the hope kindled by destiny, stepped forward with a fierce protectiveness that belied her gentle nature. "Who goes there?" she demanded, her voice a blend of determination and apprehension as it echoed off the cold stone. The mysterious figure slowly raised a hand in a gesture of either peace or warning. His features were half hidden by the shadow cast from the receding storm, but his voice, when he spoke, was low and resonant, a murmur that seemed to carry the weight of ancient odes. "I come with counsel from the sacred spring," he said cryptically, his eyes locked on the glowing birthmark. "Your journey has awoken forces that have slumbered in these canyons, and not all that arise will welcome the flame." In that charged pause, as the canyon's ancient voices mingled with the present turmoil, the wind whispered secrets of betrayal and promise alike. The group, now huddled in the half-light of the canyon that guarded its mysteries well, felt the burden of choices yet unmade. Every stone, every whisper of air, seemed to herald the next step in their perilous quest, a step that could lead either to redemption or to ruin. With the spectral glow of the child's mark illuminating uncertain paths and the canyon's shadows shifting with newfound menace, the group stood on the threshold of an unseen ambush, their fate hanging delicately between trust and treachery. As the mysterious figure's words faded into the murmuring wind, a sharp, insistent clatter echoed from deeper within the canyon, as if the sacred spring itself had awakened to call them forward, into dangers that may yet lie in wait. The eerie clatter that had reverberated through the canyon, in part, for it had not been the ramblings of an unsettled wind, but the herald of approaching forces. As the group gathered near the narrow entrance leading into the heart of the sacred canyon, the mysterious figure who had emerged from the shadows stepped forward with measured purpose. His face, now partially illuminated by the flickering glow of a makeshift campfire, revealed the lined wisdom of a tribal elder, one whose eyes bore both sorrow and undying hope. "I am Chaitin," the elder intoned, his voice a low rumble that resonated with the weight of generations past. "I have long guarded the passage to the sacred spring. Tonight, your arrival has awakened what has slumbered here for centuries." His words, spoken with deliberate cadence, shifted the atmosphere in the canyon from one of latent threat to solemn inevitability. The clatter that had earlier signified disarray now receded into silence, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to rise from the very stone of the canyon walls. Jonah, ever alert yet feeling an unfamiliar stirring of calm resolve, lowered his revolver and inclined his head respectfully. His life had been a litany of losses, of kin, of hope, of fire, and yet the presence of this elder hinted at a redemption carved by destiny rather than wrought by violence. "We have come seeking answers," Jonah said quietly, his gravelly tone tempered by a rare tenderness. "We follow the prophecy, the promise of healing these scorched lands." Elena, standing close to her child whose tiny body was swathed in destiny, met Chaitin's gaze with a serene conviction. "I have long heard my mother's whispered lore," she murmured. "They spoke of a spring where water and fire meet, a merging of opposites that can mend even the deepest wounds of the heart and the land. I have carried that vision with me, though frightened by its peril. Now, with this child's mark burning as clear as the midday sun, I know that our journey's end is near." Her words, delicate yet determined, wove hope and ancient promise into the cool desert air. Dakota, standing silently beside his loyal warrior companion, nodded in agreement. His ritual gestures had chiseled signs in the dust along their path, marking a guided trail toward this very moment. "The sacred spring awaits," Dakota intoned, his tone both reverent and resolute. "Our ancestors whispered a time when the light of the flame would calm the fury of the earth and unite those divided by centuries of strife. Tonight, fate calls for that reconciliation." At this, the child, a silent, unassuming beacon of possibility, began to stir. The flame-shaped birthmark on its small hand, which had flickered softly as they traversed storms and hidden trails, now ignited into a steady, radiant blaze. The brilliance was not harsh, but warm, as though it were the heartbeat of the spring itself. In that moment, the air shimmered with a gentle luminescence. Even the dark crevices of the canyon walls seemed to soften in the glow. Birds, long silent in their shelters, timidly emerged to witness the miracle, their delicate chirps harmonizing with the murmuring winds. Silas, whose hardened eyes had wavered between skepticism and reluctant fascination throughout their arduous trek, closed his gaze for a heartbeat. The seeds of old prejudice and fear were now replaced by the stirring evidence of something profoundly elemental and healing. His voice, low and thoughtful, finally broke the encompassing silence. "I never imagined that this barren land could cradle such wonder. Perhaps, in the very fire that once consumed my world, there lies the promise of rebirth." Even the preacher, whose earlier words had dripped with ominous warnings and a desire for control, seemed to have been subdued by the unfolding miracle. His features were softened now, the hardened lines of suspicion slowly yielding to something like awe, or perhaps regret. His eyes flickered between the glowing mark and the gathered assembly. "The divine has a peculiar way of working through both fear and hope," he whispered, uncertainty and perhaps a hint of surrender in his tone. Chaitin, the tribal elder, beckoned them forward with a slow, deliberate sweep of his hand. "Follow me," he said, and led the group deeper into the canyon. The passage opened into a hidden grotto, where the walls were adorned with ancient petroglyphs, symbolic figures and spirals that spoke of water, wind, and flame interwoven in timeless harmony. At the center of the grotto, shrouded by a gentle mist that shimmered under the first light of dawn, lay the sacred spring. Its water was crystal clear, reflecting the delicate interplay of sunrise and the remnants of night, and its gentle murmur was like the soft cadence of an oldhymn. The group hesitated only a moment before stepping into the cool, dew-kissed clearing. As they advanced toward the spring's edge, the very ground around them pulsed with an almost sentient energy, as if the earth had been holding its breath for this convergence of fate. Elena could feel it in her bones, a magnetic pull that urged her onward, an embrace that was both maternal and divine. At the water's edge, she knelt and cradled her child in her arms. With trembling fingers, she brushed her hand over the glowing mark, and in that instant, a cascade of luminous sparks danced outward, merging with a delicate veil of mist rising from the spring. The sparks swirled and channeled upward, converging into a spectacular column of ephemeral fire that stretched skyward. The brilliance of the flame illuminated the ancient carvings on the walls, casting shifting silhouettes that seemed to recount stories of healing and unity lost to time. The supernatural confluence of water and fire in that sacred moment was a physical embodiment of the prophecy, the child's pure, unbridled essence merging with the age-old spirit of the land to cleanse all wounds. Jonah, watching this radiant spectacle, felt a suffocating weight of past sorrows begin to lift. For years, he had wandered the barren deserts, carrying a heart scarred by flames of loss and grief. Now, before his eyes, the child's light was mending not only the broken promise of a unified land, but also his own fragmented soul. "At long last," he murmured, voice thick with emotion, "the bitter ashes of old grief are giving way to tender new blooms." Every heart present, once guarded, hardened, or subdued by fear, now glimmered with cautious hope in the face of this miraculous display. Takota's voice emerged softly, steeped in the cadence of oral lore. "The sacred spring speaks," he declared as the elemental fire gradually subsided into a steady glow in the child's mark. "It proclaims that the time of division is over, and that the bonds between the people of this land must be forged anew in the fires of understanding and unity." His words stirred an almost palpable current of resolve among the gathering, as if the very souls of the ancient canyon awakened to bear witness. Silas, once the epitome of hardened settler resolve wrought from distrust and old grievances, now recognized that the transformation of their land demanded more than empty rhetoric. With quiet determination, he lowered his head in solemn respect. "I will ride no further to sow discord," he vowed, his voice carrying the weight of self-forgiveness and commitment to a new future. "If this sacred spring harbors a power to heal our wounded hearts, then it is a power I must honor." Even the preacher, eyes downcast yet reflective, seemed entranced by the promise woven through the interplay of nature's forces. His earlier schemes or desires for control had dissolved in the face of the tangible, ineffable miracle unfolding before him. For a long while, he said little, as though the truth of that luminous moment transcended all words. As the first full rays of the sun emerged, casting a golden glow through the canyon, Chaitin stepped back, his weathered face breaking into a rare, serene smile. "This is the dawn of a new chapter for these lands," he pronounced softly. "The sacred spring has accepted the gift of flame and water, and thus the prophecy is affirmed. But remember, though today we celebrate the healing of our ancient wounds, the path ahead is paved with both wonder and challenge. The flame marks a beginning, not an end. In that charred space between revelation and possibility, Jonah gathered Elena close, his eyes shining with renewed purpose. "I have seen darkness consume all I cared for, but now," he said, his voice resolute yet tender, "I see the radiant promise of hope for you, for this child, and for every soul tethered to this scorched yet resilient land." His words, like a benediction, wrapped around them all, binding their disparate paths toward one destiny forged in the crucible of hope. The child, still cradled in Elena's arms, cooed softly, a sound that mingled with the gentle gurgle of the sacred spring, as if nature itself had orchestrated a lullaby of renewal. The fire in its marked pulse in quiet harmony with the rhythm of the earth, a silent assurance that the legacy born under an eclipse would endure, mending and remaking the West in its image. Takoda and his warrior companion exchanged a knowing glance, their eyes reflecting both the pain of ancient epics and the promise of reawakened kinship among peoples long divided. The message was clear. The sacred power of the spring and of the child was meant to rally hearts, close old wounds, and build bridges over the chasms of the past. In the cooling light of the morning, as the group slowly dispersed to forge their individual paths on the long journey ahead, some to rebuild, others to reconcile, and a few to simply bear witness, the echoes of the sacred spring continued to whisper softly across the canyon. The prophecy had been fulfilled in part, yet its full meaning would continue to unfold in the lives of those touched by this miraculous convergence. Elena, with quiet resolve and a heart transitioning from fear to hope, murmured a promise to the newborn and to herself. "Let this flame be a guide, a beacon of unity that shall light our darkest trails." As the campfire's embers dwindled and the desert stirred with the promise of change, Jonah rode off to mend the remnants of his shattered past, while Silas and even the preacher, now strangers to old enmities, looked toward a future they dared not fully imagine. And though the sacred spring had calmed the storm of division for now, high above in the vast expanse of starlit sky, a single stray cloud drifted slowly, a silent herald of future challenges and new beginnings. In that subtle, unspoken promise lay the knowledge that the story of this land and the enduring legacy of the child born under an eclipse was only just beginning to ignite the fire of transformation amongst these timeless, rugged plains. Thus, beneath the soft glow of a morning reborn, the echo of destiny lingered in every whispered wind and every trembling petroglyph carved upon the ancient stones, a promise that somewhere, amid the ceaseless struggles and quiet miracles of the West, hope would continue to flame, bridging hearts and birthing new legends for those bold enough to follow its light.